Welcome to the Building Doctor Show with Jens Johansson.
All right. Welcome to the Building Doctor Show. I'm your host, Jens Johansson, and I'm thrilled to see you join us today to learn more about your buildings. With this being Thanksgiving week, we understand the holidays can be a stressful time getting together with extended family, trying not to talk about politics, who are you dating these days, and making sure you have everybody's Black Friday holiday gift lists. Your building and your community are probably stressing too. We're getting into the storm season in the Pacific Northwest. We've just gone through our bomb cyclone and lost power and had trees hit buildings. You're doing last minute budget ratifications. Financials need to get done, and that last meeting of the year needs to get scheduled before the holiday break. So today we're talking about Angst-giving. We're going to put together a board survival guide for you for the holidays. So we get it. It's easy to feel the weight of juggling celebrations with the responsibility of managing your buildings and community. But don't worry, we're serving up a hearty dose of help with your buildings and community management. So for our podcast and YouTube listeners, thanks for tuning in. You can also put your questions and comments in the chat there, and we'll get those answered for you. Don't forget to subscribe and like us wherever you are listening. So I hope those of you attending have lots of questions or even stories and vignettes or advice to share, because they help steer the show and give everybody value. And as always, if you have a more specific question, stay tuned. We'll have a link in there to schedule a free one-on-one call with one of our building doctors. Our producer, Carolyn's going to be monitoring the chat, and I will go through the Q&A panel at the end of the show. So the chat is where she's going to be putting links to resources and guides and things like that we've prepared to help you with this. And the Q&A is where you can put your questions and go through that at the end of the show. So remember, this show is for educational content only. We are not giving financial, legal, or engineering advice here. So let's get into it. So today we're going to be talking about, kind of the angst giving, and less angst and more thanks. So we're going to break down some of these questions. We put together kind of the top 10 lists that boards are facing of all the, just the key issues we hear from boards and we see them face. And we're going to give you practical strategies to tackle these challenges and ensure your roles are less stressful and more effective. But before we dive into the list, we're going to start with a case study that, kind of a question we received from a recent question. And we'll just kind of break that down for you. Okay, the question's kind of 4 parts. Our building envelope is not keeping the water away like it should. So these people already know something's going on. The siding was replaced about 15 years ago, and it was done on the cheap, because that's all we had in reserves. That's all we could afford. Hey, we get it. The simple things like replacing a window now is an ordeal, because the windows were trimmed out in kind of a weird way. So now we got to take everything apart to replace a window. The winds we receive can be brutal, including driving rain that blows upwards against the building. And so a little fact for you, usual winds can actually drive water up 2 inches. So it's not just coming at you diagonally or horizontally. It hits the surface and actually goes up in. And so the window design pressures we use talk about that. So let's talk about this person's long question. So we know the building's leaking. Okay. How? Do we have buckets and towels in the windows and things like that? So, for whatever reason, we know it's leaking, but it's only been 15 years and siding is supposed to last like 30 or 40 years. So what went wrong? Sometimes, we do a cheap fix. We acknowledge that fix was done on the cheap. But what happened? Did 10 years fly by or 15 years fly by? And just kind of, we see some cheap fixes. Hey, in 5 years, I'm not going to be here, so I'm not too worried about it. I'm going to sell my unit. But what happened? So they need to dig into those whys and the budget questions. Was it low bid? Did somebody have a guy? I know a guy. He can beat that price. So the answer to that lies there for them. But another thing we're seeing is kind of design oversight. So apparently the windows are so hard to replace. Good design incorporates good maintenance, saying, I know I'm going to need those. So how do I take things off so that I can get to that? So you'll hear us talk about flashings and counter flashings. Well, that's so that you don't have to pull the cladding off to put a new roof membrane down in between things. We're hearing the acknowledgement of a robust site. So maybe it's on the coast or it's on a hilltop or it's on the water somehow, and it's just really getting blasted, as opposed to a protected site in a dip or hollow, or maybe surrounded by trees or other buildings. And that it gets hit by severe winds, and so that these brutal winds and rain are just pelting the system, and so they need a robust robust exterior, robust siding and waterproofing system. And so we're hearing lots of things coming out in this, and we've all been there. We've all been there and picked hey, it's a budget option, it's a cheap option. But we can tell from this question that the board is staying awake at night, worrying every time that it rains. So we've come to realize there are real people behind every one of these questions, and they're stressed. And I think everybody can feel it in that. So we learn from experience. I know that they will do this project differently next time. And the reason you guys are listening to the show today is so that you don't have to pay this board's experience tax. So if you pay attention, they just saved you about a 30K assessment. And so that's what this show is all about. That's what makes us create this content for you. And I wanted to just start it with that of if you've experienced some of this stuff, throw a thumbs up into the chat, and maybe think about a question you had for us at the end. So let's walk through the top 10 reasons you're stressed or scared about being on the board, and transfer the angst into thanks. All right, angst number one. Hey, you work full time. You don't have the bandwidth as a volunteer board member to run the business of your association. You recognize the fact that you need education, training, even mindset or right goals to run your community. So we get it. When you return home from a long day at work, last thing you want to do is answer 20 HOA emails. But we also understand you moved into this community to smile at your neighbors and not have them give you dirty looks or turn away when they see you at the mailbox. And so that angst is, I'm working full time and I don't have time to run this business of being a board. And once board members understand they actually run a small city, they have the power to tax, that's assessments. They have the power to penalize, that's fees and fines. They even have the power to kick you out and foreclose. And so that once board members realize that they didn't just join the board to pick the paint colors and the flowers out front, it gets serious. Nobody volunteered to kick your neighbor out. So you want to get back to a smooth process where your members are happy. And so how can we deal with this full-time, lack of bandwidth and training? We've got some resources in there. So we've got some free resources, but we can also assist you with some kind of paid coaching along the line. But bottom line, getting a good manager to really help you with this stuff, to help you understand what you need, and maybe even an HOA attorney to help you walk through some of that stuff is super helpful. And so good managers can help you through that. So bandwidth. Angst number 2, your whole team isn't leading. Your board members are in the same boat as you are as far as time and training. Your manager's non-responsive, meaning they're busy. They've got lots of managers or lots of properties to manage, and they've got to be going here and there. And this is a common problem we hear with managers of I've got to have a portfolio of 20 properties and I'm trying to keep up the best I can with all of them. And, the board has to do something. The board has to make their decisions. I can give them a path, but the board has to make their decisions. And so, and then in addition, the contractors are giving you the wrong information. They're just selling you their services. The contractors construction is broken up into trades, so they do their particular trade really well, but they get in and get out. And if they're selling you roofing products, they're going to identify roof problems. If they're selling you windows, they're going to identify window problems and not necessarily tie those two things together where the roof meets the wall right next to a window. And so it's kind of this, you're only part of the board, but in that first angst, it's like, I don't have time. I got to get off the board. The second part is your whole board is feeling the same or acting the same, and you can't get your manager involved, or at least they're not giving you enough to-dos, and your contractors are just taking the money. So how do we resolve that? So teamwork on the board is a big deal, and it really gets into more, you can call it woo woo in the sense of setting a vision, but here's what we mean by that: community vision. What do we want our community to be? Do we want it to be high rentals? Do we want it to be, a place where young families are welcome? Do we want it to be, 55 and older, and there's regulations behind that, but do we want it to be high end? I mean, we want all our values to be up. And so we need to set a vision that says we need to pay attention to picking up garbage. We need to pay attention to landscaping and touching up the paint. Otherwise, we start getting this vision of a clearly neglected, run down, thing that's not working very well. And then onto the vision of community, back to that smiling at the mailbox, back to that enjoying maybe a holiday get together and potluck. Do we want a community that supports one another and is friendly, or do we want a community where everybody's left in the dark and we don't really know who's who, don't get along, and all that stuff? So these types of visions, expectations, open communication, and then scheduling these regular seasonal gatherings. There's no vote. Just come have some ice cream. Come have some cookies. Come have some hot chocolate around the holidays, and do a food drive. Something that brings the community together a little bit. Maybe they're cleaning up the neighborhood streets or doing something like that. So think about those things. That's how you can get involvement and get things happening for that. Just not feeling like the rest of the board or your management or your contractors are really connected. So on to the third thing. Your documents are disorganized. You don't have access to your bylaws and governing documents. No one has fully explained what they mean and how you need to operate. You haven't seen your financials in a long time, and are they accurate? Are we saving for the right things? Is your reserve study up to date? You can't find copies of building plans or past reports or invoices, so you don't know what work has been done or still needs to be done. And so this is real common because management companies change and boards change, and so that knowledge base goes away. And so I know we did something a couple of years ago, but I can't. Where are the records? And in the old days, they were file boxes full of files, and those file boxes were transferred or supposed to be transferred per, management change or board change. Now they're electronic and they're in the cloud. So who had access to what? And so this is actually a really big thing that we're seeing of just nobody knows where anything is. Nobody has any idea who has any history on your property. And that could help you saying, hey, we were out there 4 years ago and here's what we did. So the easy thanks behind that is just getting some organization and stuff like that together. And so, whether they're cloud-based tools or creating a document management policy, that's just a filing system, insurance, legal, budgets, repairs, here's all the invoices. Then digitizing that physical record, obviously using HOA management software that your manager will bring you. If you're a smaller community, you can still buy this stuff and set it up and use that and track these types of repairs and things like that. So the kind of the big thing there is one of the biggest things we see is and advise is making sure your board is using board emails versus the president's personal email. And we recommend this for a couple of reasons. So it's to the board president, and as that president changes, they hand over their email account so that the new president can see the past history of what's been going on and kind of stay in the loop. And it also kind of keeps you out of trouble. If I'm the president using my personal email account and there's some kind of litigation or claim, now that whole personal email account becomes subpoenable and I have to turn over all my, Gmail or Hotmail or Outlook or whatever I use. And so using those community association based emails so that you can have a transfer of knowledge. And then, what's the access into the Gmail work drive or whatever, so you can keep track of those records. All right, angst 4. Hey, you've been burned before. You've hired contractors without a good scope of work, plans, or permits, and you've had to redo some of that work. And so you don't know who to trust. Let's go right back to that first question. We just did this stuff like 15 years ago, and now it's leaking already, or we know it's leaking. So when did we? About 10 years ago, or about 5 years ago. So 10 years in, we had suspected leaks. So talk about getting burned before, once bitten, twice shy. And so you're mad, you just finished paying off this 15-year assessment or this loan of 12 or 15 years, and now we got to do it again. So worse, your bylaws or rules or the understanding of them has caused some owners to repair and other owners let their units fall into disrepair. Now we got a mismatch of fixes. The third floor unit did their windows wrong and that leaked down on the second floor and first floor and messed with them. So whose insurance policy is paying for what? And so that causes even more confusion than the once bitten, twice shy. But anyway, how do we get around that? Again, with good managers, good project managers will help you through that. So understanding how your bylaws are enforced, understanding the rules and bylaws I'm using loosely, but bylaws, governing documents, whatever your rule book is. Being clear about communication with residents, applying the rules uniformly. We see hey, 5 years ago the old board didn't make us pay for windows, but the new board wants to make us pay for windows, and this kind of thing. So educate before penalizing, work with professionals. So these are ways really to coordinate this in the sense of good best practices to stay on top of these things. And again, good managers will be able to help you through that. But also good HOA attorneys can help you sift that out. And then, periodically we need to review and update bylaws to affect the evolving needs, the changing vision, the pulling those things together and using resident feedback to identify that as well. If you want to run a healthy project, we just have a easy, flowchart way to do it. That's going to be in that resource guide of start with a visual inspection, move to invasive, move over to developing plans and specs and a scope of repair, talk about getting funding, either loan or your assessment or reserves, and then proceed with repairs, and then enjoy the healthy building for years to come. So that's how we do a project. The previous one was about your bylaws. All right, angst number 5, head in the sand. And that's the ostrich syndrome. The past boards just haven't addressed the problems or raised the dues or set aside money. I think one of the dumbest election campaigns I hear is no new taxes under my watch. And so if you elect me as board president, I'm not going to raise our assessments. It's like, well, all the prices are going up and your reserve study is probably underfunded, and you're not going to add more money to that. I'd rather have a little bit more money than less money. And so be careful how you're keeping your head in the sand, or just la 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 la. What are those 3 monkeys that don't hear anything or see anything? And the biggest example of that, unfortunately, is the Champlain Towers collapse. And so this led to all other industries being affected, primarily the banks, who lost out on their mortgages because there was no building left. And so that's the result of the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac revisions of making sure that you've done some things with your reserves and making sure you inspect your buildings and doing all this stuff. But this example, if you go back and Google it and understand what happened, the board knew about these issues for years and just ignored it, or the loud person in the room controlled the show. That's another angst we have for you. And just browbeat the board to not do what they needed to do and actually keep up with the problem. And then a tragedy happens like this. So the thanks aside for that is regularly assess financial health and plan for future needs. And that's kind of proactive maintenance. I'm not saying if you're already fully funded, you can slow down on raising dues, but most boards need some more money. And so staying on top of things, staying on top of your spring maintenance, continue polishing and shining and trying to get the building lifespan to extend, and you'll keep things in better shape. So we have a couple of guides in that handout. All right, angst number 6. Letting a few squeaky wheels or even bullies run the show with their complaints, threats, or promises that they know a guy. So don't let meetings or initiatives get derailed by the 2%. The 2% noisy, the 2% annoying or rude or bullies. The other 98% are looking for reasonableness and counting on you as the board to make those decisions. We just see it way too often that somebody knows better, arranges for the fix, and then they move out, leaving the rest with the problem. And so we see that with board members. They knowingly do a cheap fix, and guess what? In a year they're gone, and leave it for the rest of you to deal with. So, the thanks behind this, strategies on how to handle difficult personalities, is establishing ground rules for the meetings. And the biggest thing you can get, it's understanding. There's a $7 book on Amazon. It's not this one. This looks like a meaty Robert's Rules of Order. The $7 book on Amazon is a thin little pamphlet that makes it super easy to establish some ground rules and enforce the Robert's Rules of Order. And there's plenty of stuff on YouTube of breaking down Robert's Rules of Order, and you can watch some videos about it. But it's a very easy way to run meetings And agendas are another great way to run meetings. We got to talk about this, got to talk about this. I'm sorry, we can't talk about your stuff. It's not on the agenda. And so you got to coordinate. Hey, if you want something on the agenda, get it to me. I'll get it on this month's agenda. And so really controlling that meeting. Active listening, of course, listening. Everybody needs to be heard, but it's not fully a democracy. I mean, you are elected to be the board and you need to make some decisions, and the people expect you to make some decisions, but they also understand it's a struggle. And so, building relationships outside of meetings, being open to hearing from the other parties. And, this is basically how to handle difficult personalities and different opinions. And then ultimately, get some professional training or resources, or have somebody else run the meeting for you. Managers, HOA attorneys, even having security at some meetings. We've seen that too. So, all right, angst number 7. This is probably a pretty big one too, and it's really simple. But you, as the board, don't communicate enough or effectively with your membership and neighbors. Again, you're the visionary and voice that's elected to do this. And so too many boards are scared to share information with the membership. They don't want to share it. It's potentially, we don't want to ruffle feathers. We don't want to have to call a meeting. Sometimes they hide behind this, I was elected, so I'm going to make the decisions, and I don't have to get a vote on this, so I'm going to take care of it. And we try to call time out and say, do a town hall. Don't have a vote attached to it. Run some meetings so that you can come back and say, hey, folks, I'm sorry you weren't at the 6 town halls before this vote, but we talked about this, and we talked a lot about this. We brought in experts. We've really plowed this field. And just because you don't come to the meetings doesn't give you the chance to derail them. But, the 98% will appreciate it and will be glad that you're, sharing the information, sharing the struggle, coming to them saying, I'm in this boat too. I'm being assessed just like you are. We're trying to figure this out. And so here's the way to do that. So as far as a solution or a thanks to that, we've got a little digital communication checklist and, very simple things, but they're simple, but we don't see a lot of communities do them. And so Facebook page, that can kind of go both ways. You can have a ranting Facebook group, and you can have a responsible one that's administering the Facebook group, but it becomes a place to talk. Capturing your neighbor's email. So what do I mean by this? Creating an email campaign of updates. Here's what we're working on. You remember at the last meeting, we discussed the following. Here's the issues we're trying to resolve. And so send it out via email chain. And we get a lot of, well, we don't have accurate emails, or we don't know people's cell number. Like, come on, folks, get that stuff and keep it updated. Keep the communication flow moving. And we talked about creating separate board emails, having these community events, sharing these documents, via cloud. You can share out updates. They can read the whole report. You don't have to, in the old days, we had to print them and mail them and do all that stuff. So again, reiterating, get a good manager that helps you communicate this stuff, and good managers know how to run that communication flow. So that's how to keep your group informed. Angst number 8 is kind of an interesting, fear of hiring experts. Hiring a consultant or HOA attorney to give you reasonable advice is viewed as too complicated or too expensive. And so I was asking a HOA attorney we work with, and I said, what do you do about these bylaws? And he said, I just write a quick opinion letter. Here's my legal opinion based upon your bylaws. And I think the windows are owned by the unit owners and not by they're not a common element. Okay, great. We've got a legal opinion. We're just a group of volunteer board members. We're not making that decision, and that legal opinion costs $1,100. And so it needs to be budgeted for, and you need to figure that out. But now we have a starting point. So now we can either make those in an association common element, or we can, keep them as owner control. But we asked the lawyer told us what they thought. And so it uncomplicates things actually. And, talking with a consultant that isn't selling you windows or roof or things like that, they're typically more independent, saying, well, here's the problem and it needs to relate like this, and several things have to be tied together and integrated correctly. And so it's a combination of lots of things. So, that's kind of a number one thing. It's just too expensive to do that. It's like, oh, okay, well, how has what you've been doing so far without advice worked? Well, we're in this pickle. Okay, well, let's get out of that pickle. So the thanks items, again, professionals prevent costly mistakes. So we're kind of debunking the myths here. That $1,000 legal opinion saves you thousands of dollars later fighting about it and still doing goofy things about it. It basically saves money in the long run. The myth of we can handle this on our own. Well, how many times have you gone through this big repair project? Because we've gone through it thousands of times. Is this your first? Okay, well, you're gonna make some mistakes that uh, every new person makes, and so professionals bring some expertise and experience, and that the board of volunteers may not have. Too complicated to work with these guys. I gotta sign contracts and they have these processes and systems, and I don't want to do all that. It's like, well, we're trying to simplify the process with clear guidance and keep these projects on track using best practices. Yes, you have to go through 5 steps, but all the 5 steps work well together. The myth, we only need them for major issues. And so we kind of agree, you don't need to hire a consultant to paint the building, or do you? And so we can prevent smaller issues from escalating into bigger issues, but we can also say, if you're going to do that, that affects this. So you need to make sure that this is working as well. And so and then we have this subscription service that you can basically call you, and just like your doctor on telehealth, you can talk to your building doctor, via FaceTime and say, hey, here's what I'm thinking. I've got a quick question. Is this a good way to do it? Well, you say yes, but, or maybe, here's what I'm thinking about. Have you considered that? Okay, thanks. Bye. And so there's, just having somebody in your back pocket to kind of ask a quick question of is a nice way to keep that going. Oops, there we go. And then kind of debunking the the residents' complaints, if you will, explaining the value of expert advice. Boards can show residents that hiring professionals improve the property values and reduces the long-term costs in the end. And so kind of working through what this thanks is about is debunking that kind of angst that professional help is too expensive. Because we can go back to item number 1 and say, hey, I'm a volunteer board member and I work 60 hours a week, and then I come back home and try to run this nights and weekends, and my pay isn't that much. And so I'm getting burned out and I need some help. I need some backstopping. I need somebody to walk with me and bounce my ideas off of, and maybe even take lead on a few of these things so that we can get through this. So, all right. Angst number 9. This is kind of an interesting one. You just kind of dumped it. The leadership one is different. There's usually one person in a 4 or 5 person board. One person takes a little time out because it's busy at work, and then the other 3 can cover, and they take turns doing that, and you figure it out with a group board. But for boards that have just abdicated their responsibility, well, that's why we hire a manager. Or well, in order, our manager's kind of busy and it's kind of hard to change, and if we have to change, we might not get this done. And so two sides of the spectrum. One, just totally abdicating responsibility. That's not what community managers do. They lead you, guide you, but you need to do the push-ups to have strong, chest muscles. So you need to put in the workout. They will show you how to do that workout, but you need to do the exercise. And you'd be surprised how many board members, wow, I thought I hired a manager. I thought I'd be taken care of. No, they don't run your life for you. They don't run your whole house and community investment for you. They keep you on track on the high level. So if they're not doing what they need to do and they're not responsive, we see that a lot too. You need to find one that is. And so that angst, it's too hard to change. Well, you're putting up with D- results, in 6 months. Are you still going to be feeling this way if nothing changes? And so get through that pain, find a good manager that's doing a good job, and you'll be a lot happier, and you won't be following around trying to micromanage them, trying to hover over them, making sure they do what they're supposed to do. And your building your community will be in a better place. So the answers to that, you're in control. And one of the phrases we use is version 1 is better than version none. So even your first approach or your first draft or your first try to getting these things going, let's move up from a D to a C, and then from a C to a B, and then from a B to an A. So version 3 is better than version 2. Version 1 is better than version none. So do something about it. You're in control. You gotta keep going. We're here to encourage you and push you. And along those lines, we have an interview guide and tips on evaluating a good manager. And so that's part of that Q2. And we're not here bashing on managers. We've shared these things with the good managers. Yeah, I'm tired of losing the jobs to bad, sucky managers that don't work as hard as I do or bring as much value as I do. So I agree with you. I hate those managers too. Clean up the industry for me, would you? And so we believe in good managers and we want to help you find them. All right, angst number 10. If you're facing a big project, big strip and reclad or a big rot and damage repair, all of a sudden you kind of said, hey, I've got a little business experience and I've got some time to be on the board. Now we're facing a 6, 7, hopefully not 8, 7-figure construction project. Now I have to be an architect or an engineer or a project manager, a lawyer, a banker, a manager, an accountant, on top of making routine board decisions. So you didn't know you could hire a good team to help you through this. So we work in this niche of helping boards with their building problems. We can help you, as much as you'd like, as little or as much as you'd like. I can recall very vividly some very strong project management construction board members who took on a lot of the heavy lifting, and they did a good job. And then there's others that, it's not for me. I'd rather hire a team and hold that team accountable and make sure that we have something good at the end of the day. And whether they're lawyers or bankers or whoever, but understanding you don't have to do everything, and don't think that you have to go study and become an engineer to understand some of these repair details. If you're working with a good consultant, they'll break it down for you and explain why that's necessary. So that thanks again, who we are and the communities we help, and learning with us. We have lots of teaching sessions and educational opportunities. This is one of them, our monthly webinar. So for those of you who like to type, you can go to learn.j2consultants.com/resources. If those of you seeing the screen and want to take a screenshot of these QR codes, they'll take you to those places.
This podcast is part of J2's free live webinar, The Building Doctor Show. To attend the live show and ask your questions during the Q&A, visit www.j2consultants.com.